Hi, I'm Natasha Barry. I'm resident of Robertson for over 30 years. I'm going to talk about the history of Robertson. Why is Robertson called Robertson today? Before Robertson became Robertson, we can still find fragments of a forgotten past in the mountains and near the streams where the nomadic Khoisan hunters used to refresh themselves. They're amazing bird sculptures that we don't know where they come from or who made them in the mountains. But why are we Robertson today? Under the VOC, by 1710, what they called Freeburgers or Vryburgers came out to this area, and one Peter Hubert was granted a grazing license for a farm called across the Breda between the two cross rivers. And this area used to originally be called Hoëprivier, after one of the main rivers, Hoëprivier. And in 1847, the Barry and nephews had established a trading store here called Hoëprivier. But there was a Scottish minister called the Reverend Dr. William Robertson, and he was appointed as to oversee the entire Overberg based in Swellendam. And every 3 months he would go to all the surrounding villages to do a communion, a nachtmaal. And when he came to this area, he came to Johannes W. van Zyls' farm called Oor het rode sand aan Hoëprivier. And it was here that he would do the nachtmaal. And in 1852, this Van Zyl and the school teacher, Mr. Maurits Pollock, wrote to Dr. William Robertson to request that a proper congregation and a town get started here. And not only a month went past when they received an answer from Dr. Robertson instructing Mr. Maurits Pollock to buy a portion of Mr. Van Zyl's farm for the princely sum of £4,200. Which is a lot of money in those days. But it was quite a risky business to establish a town. You didn't necessarily know if people would come, because it might have been nobody. But obviously with the trading store here, there was that it would become a town, that people would come. And then in January of the following year, on the 19th of January, Robertson was officially formed as a township, a dorpsgebied, with 26 gentlemen who became the guarantors, and 10 of them were elected to be on the directorate to manage the town. And the town was surveyed by H. van Reenen, and a total of 199 plots were auctioned off by Joseph Barry for about £40 each. An annual tax of 10 shillings on each plot was used for the building and maintenance of the first Dutch Reformed Church. Now, interestingly enough, this tax continued until 1951. And at the auction on the 4th and 5th of May 1853, an earth was promised to the first baby boy born in the new town of Robertson. And in December of the same year, a baby boy was born, and he was duly baptized Robertson Barry Mazurek by Dr. Robertson, with Joseph Barry being one of his 7 sponsors. Now, the transfer deed for Robertson went through on the 28th of July, 1853. However, it was October 1853 before the surrounding Dutch Reformed Church circles of Worcester, Callendon, Tilbach actually gave their approval, and the British colonial government only gave their approval in December of that year. So obviously Dr. Robertson was somebody that when he decided to do something, he did. And the new town was named in his honor, and he faithfully served the entire Overberg for 39 years. Now, prior to the establishment of Robertson, the Wesleyan missionaries had already started ministering in the area and assisting freed slaves to adapt to the new circumstances. And in 1859, built on the corner of LaRue and Hopley Streets, the first Wesleyan or Methodist church was completed, with Reverend Henry Tyndale as its first minister. So Robertson also has a street named Tyndale in the Reverend's honor. They also ran an excellent school for children of mixed race, which was sadly closed down, as were many mission schools during the apartheid era. Until a high school was built by the apartheid government in the late 1960s, the only high school option was then to go to the other side of the mountain, to the Cape Town side, and if you had family, you were lucky, you could stay with them. And if not, it was just not a financially viable, feasible option. And the village grew around the church and the Barry store, and later Lieberman and Bierski, a well-known Cape Town firm, opened a branch, and other small traders came and followed. There was a Dr. H.P. van der Merwe who served from 1903 to 1925, and it was during his tenure as the Dutch Reformed minister that the new church, that's called Die Moederkerk, was built in Robertson with its neo-Gothic steeple that could be seen from miles around. And sadly, services up to this time had always been attended by all racial groups, but in 1907, a separate mission church was built for those of mixed race, and the missionary Eerwaarde P.W.J. van Zyl was appointed. Now, Robertson's always been partial to drought. There was one in 1820, there was one in 1860, and you'll remember there was one not so long ago that only ended in 1920, sorry. And these are quite disastrous times for the population. And there was a Dr. Humph who actually built an irrigation furrow from the Breda River in 1860 during that drought. And Robertson actually has the oldest irrigation scheme in the entire South Africa, when Mr. Lebrun, the civil commissioner for Robertson, requested state assistance as far back as 1862, and several minor schemes were attempted in the 60s. However, in 1896, backed by the Cape Irrigation Act, concrete developments towards establishing a large-scale irrigation scheme moved forward. Construction of the scheme started in February of 1900, with Mr. Scaife appointed as engineer of a diversion weir across the Breda River, about 8 kilometers outside Robertson on the Worcester side. It was rather delayed by the Anglo-Boer War and flooding, and this scheme was only completed in 1904. And eventually the Greater Brunflay Dam was then established in 1980, which has been a blessing for the entire valley and has managed to keep the valley alive and agriculture alive in the valley through several droughts. Interestingly enough, Robertson was one of the towns where you had a vast number of people from all race groups that went to fight in the First and the Second World War. And the first South African and the first Jew to be killed in action in the war against Hitler was Sidney Lazarus from Robertson. He was shot down by the Italians near Alwok and is buried in Nairobi. His parents, Lewis and Ethel Lazarus, used to farm in Robertson. Robertson also has always been a very generous town, and it opened its heart to Miss Marjorie Marnock and up to 16 at a time children evacuees from England and Scotland that were in a care and stayed in a house called Barneshaven, which is today the doctor's rooms in Paul Kruger Street. And she wrote a fascinating story about looking after her charges from August 1941 to eventually being able to repatriate back in December 1951. And it also gave a very interesting insight into Robertson and its wonderful people. Thank you.